So this video is going to be very much off the cuff for a number of reasons. I'm only making this because of certain things a particularly stupid PUA troll wrote in the comment section of Barbarossa's latest video. And it got me thinking about, and that's the quotes in the beginning are from that troll, not the last one, mind you, that's someone who woke up. I present that as contrast, but so this is going to be just off the cuff, kind of me just speaking from my stomach, as it were, and asking maybe you questions as well, because I've talked about this with some of my subscribers live. For example, High Lord Absconder, I converse with him fairly frequently over Skype, sometimes Lord English as well, and well, basically the main issue, it seems to me, and this is certainly going to be the subject of future videos, I think it perhaps is the most important issue, is the validation issue now, isn't it? Men have a validation issue. It's the singular issue, it seems, the single most important issue that holds us back, that prevents us from seeing the truth, even when the truth is presented to us, even when the truth is a couple of centimeters from our noses. Some of us, at least. It's, in reference to my latest video, the one just prior, it's the same issue as to why men seem to lack that reactivity. Some men, a lot of men, even in the face of highly oppressive and disfavorable circumstances. You know? So this is the million, no, I would say it's the $1 trillion question, although these days trillions of dollars don't mean a whole lot. What's the US running up in debt these days? It's the quadrillion dollar question. Validation. We know men seek it. We also know women seek it. Now, I'm going to offer up some ideas here. This is just me speaking my mind aloud. This is a very informal video, so forgive me for that. But I ask you then for input as well. This is an important nut to crack, probably the most important one. So all human beings have a need for validation. There's no doubt about that. Women certainly have it. I mean, they have it in a very great need for validation. But they receive it throughout their lives, right? I mean, Matt Barbaros has made some excellent videos about male mother need and what have you. And we know that a baby girl, for example, receives, generally speaking, more attention than a baby male. And throughout her childhood and teenagehood, and then of course as an adult, right? Women are allegedly the pillars of civilization, and we must feed, nourish, protect them, so on and so forth. So they get a lot of attention, and they still crave validation. So this is just me hypothesizing. One very real possibility in terms of cause and effect might be the fact that men simply receive very, very little affection, very little support throughout their lives, from the minute they're torn forth from the womb to middle age and beyond. I said it once in that interview on AVFM. Part of being a man is being alone, and I mean that not just, sort of the physical state of solitude, you're in your room alone, but also, in a metaphorical sense, a greater sense. Being alone, that's part of being a man, for better or worse, usually for worse. And so, it's no mystery if this is the case. Say my hypothesis right now is correct, that this enormous need for validation, I would argue, although it's some men try to hide it, though not very well, far greater need for validation than women, if only because women have received it their whole lives. It's not to say if women hadn't, if the tables were turned, if it were the reverse situation, could be very different. Maybe women would be doing all these crazy things. I don't know. But as history stands, as prehistory stands, as current circumstances are, that need for validation is just tremendous. and it drives men to do all sorts of things. Now, there are, of course, different levels of validation. The most important one is the female validation. That is, there could be females. I mean, for enlightenment, for thinking men, that's not the case anymore. But for most men, females dictate their value. A man only has value in as much as a female accords him value. His level of self-esteem, his inherent worth. These are things. These are derived from external sources. They're not internal. We might be getting closer to the answer here. Maybe they come from women, and of course, society at large. The soldier superior officer. I really liked Barbarossa's mentioning of Napoleon's quote about a bit of ribbon. Some worthless rock on your pin on your chest, or a bit of ribbon. So, men seek it there as well. Of course, it all goes back to women. It's climbing up the dominance hierarchy, social status. That's really the crux of the matter. And I mean, I post these quotes not only because they're absurd, but also because they just show you the level of mental gymnastics some men will go to in order to validate themselves. In order to, I mean, for example, this particular PUA was trying to one-up himself in comparison to me. I mean, there are other things he wrote, such as he was a medical student and thus has achieved far more in his life than I ever will. It was under the illusion that me being close to 40, I spent my entire life behind a computer screen and never engaged with women. Go figure. I've full disclosure, I've had 6 very serious relationships and a whole bunch of other casual, whatever you want to call it. I've had my fair share of women in my time. In fact, I wouldn't have had without these experiences, I likely would not have been able to come up with the analyses and ideas I have on male-female relations and on female kind in general. So these thoughts that I have and my content do not come from a vacuum, obviously. But the point being is that this need to validate, as if getting laid were some great accomplishment. And PUAs really believe this, even though it's dictated on terms of women, and they like to convince themselves that they themselves are in charge. But this is just a symptom. PUAism, for lack of a better term, is a symptom of a greater malady. That this need for validation, the desire to, this is a made-up example. The reasonably poor man with no prospects in West Virginia who signs on to the army because he seeks his glory. He seeks to elevate himself in the eyes of society, and particularly in the eyes of women eventually. This is the malady, ultimately. It's the need for validation. The question is, how do you crack that? Now, I think so far, based on my observations, there are 2 primary ways of cracking it. One is you get burned, and a lot of us have been burned. I've been burned. I've never been married, but I've been through the ringer with women in some pretty serious situations, bizarre situations. I mean, if only you knew. One example, that's off the top of my head. Imagine if you were together with a woman for over a year, and then you find out that she was engaged the whole time, and you had no idea, because the fiancé was elsewhere in a different country. And anyway, just an example. So the point is that, so you get the burnt category. I mean, I hate using that term burnt because it's negative. It has negative. It's pejorative, but I can't really think off the top of my head of another way of putting it. Let's just assume in this context it's neutral. Burnt men who've been through the ringer, divorce, what have you, crazy stuff. What about the others? Well, they seem pretty minuscule, dwindlingly, vanishingly small. Younger men, young men, late teens, early 20s, who have come across say MGTOW content or even MRA content and are waking up, to the situation as it actually is, and have been able to sort of shed to some extent, their need for validation. None of us can completely shed our need for validation, but I think the start is the beginning is to seek value in yourself, that it exists within yourself. You do things that you enjoy, and that will be enough. But for most men, that seems to be lacking. The drive is so strong. So I'm asking you, subscribers, viewers, just what is the best approach? Because let's say we actually want to make inroads in the world, right? If we actually want to affect men. Now, of course, many of my subscribers, you guys, I mean, you are essentially brothers in arms. You know, you realize this on your own, or you come to conclusions independently, or your conclusions have been buttressed by my videos or Barbara Russell's videos or what have you. So that, I mean, it's not a bad thing. It's a good thing. But you know, preaching to the choir, as they say. But how do you touch the hearts and minds of men who cannot, for whatever reason, move past this deep need for validation? Um, and let it, and this deep need for validation, let it defines them. It defines them to the point where they're willing to risk potential annihilation if need be because they seek validation. And that is a difficult question to answer. I think it's a very difficult question to answer, and one that I don't have a ready answer to. I've just started thinking about cracking this nut in terms of stratagem, or how does one has one best approach it. I mean, this is going to be an important topic in assuming I'm still alive and the rest of us are still alive in the years to come. Uh, how does one crack that nut? The deep need for validation. Some, obviously, as I mentioned in the previous video, we have this sort of innate faculty, I guess, to recognize things. But I fear the answer will be found in the scorching fires of hell, the hell that say comes in divorce court or something else. Um, it's just strange to me that that has to be the way, because there surely should be a more painless way. And not everyone's been through the burner or the grinder, but the meat grinder. If part of the goal is to get as many men as possible to defect, get them out of the meat grinder for their own sake, for the sake of us all, we have to talk about that need for validation, the male mother need. I think the male mother need can be encapsulated in this sort of a greater sense in the need for validation. You know? No doubt it starts in the cradle, or it starts the minute the baby boy is torn forth from his mother's womb, right? But to be honest, I don't, as of this moment, this current date, I don't have a solution for it. I'm perfectly willing to admit when I don't know something and I don't know what the best approach is. But it's something that we can all brainstorm about, and maybe we'll come up with some ideas, maybe we won't. Unfortunately, the need for validation, the validation effect, as I like to call it, is it's just so endemic that it seems almost impossible to vanquish for most men. Um, but but apparently not. I mean, as I said, the reason why I posted that last quote there is some men wake up independently, or not independently, but and some men are stumbling. I mean, the PUA, the typical say this troll there, is obviously still stumbling in the dark. But it's just food for thought, basically. So me speaking my thoughts out loud. Uh, how do we address this properly, and really how do we instill in men a sense of value when they're so blindly beholden to their base biological drives? That's the question, and will be the subject of future videos, hopefully, and also I think discussions. You know, for a while now, Barbara Russ and I have wanted to do a kind of Skype informal discussion about things. High Lord Absconder and I are probably planning on doing something like that as well. And yeah, so anyway, these are important questions. Sometimes it's important, just as important to ask the question, to pose the question, as to answer certain questions. So, and write some comments, give your own ideas. This is the nut that we need to crack. Ultimately, this is the nut we need to crack, beyond all the other stuff. But anyway, thanks.